So, the second round of betas concluded last weekend for Marvel's Avengers, and I had a very different experience with the game for multiple reasons. Not only did I play the game on a different console, but I also played the game on a completely different difficulty for the majority of my playtime. In this video today, I'm going to be reviewing my experience with the August 14th beta, while reflecting on how my opinions might have changed or stayed the same compared to my previous review of the beta.
Stars and Stripes!
Hello and welcome to another Carrot Scraps video, and by another, I mean the 26th. So the way I've decided to structure this review is to mostly focus on things I didn't talk about in my previous review. So I'm going to try as hard as I can to keep my opinions and my comments sectioned. And of course, since the full game hasn't come out yet, the purpose of these reviews is to give feedback that hopefully can be taken into account and to change the game for the better before release, or even after release. So first things first, the reason why I played on the Xbox One instead of the PS4 for the majority of my gameplay was because the PS4 version of the game was acting very strangely. If you'll remember in the first beta, it was very difficult and near impossible at times to connect to other players online. Well, they definitely fixed that problem for the second beta, which made me really happy. But on the PlayStation version of the game, there was a new problem, which was this strange pop-up that would come every couple of seconds. Basically, it would tell you that you weren't connected to the internet and that you would need to plug in an Ethernet cable if you wanted to continue playing. The thing was, I knew I was connected to the internet because I had just finished playing with other players and I was streaming my gameplay live, so there was no way I could stream on the internet while not being connected to the internet. The other thing about this is that the pop-up would come every couple of minutes and interrupt my gameplay. So while I'm trying to play the game, the whole game would just pause to tell me something that is completely irrelevant. I looked it up immediately and many other people had the same problem. It seemed like it was a problem specific to the PlayStation 4 version of the game. My roommate who was trying the game on her PS4 couldn't play the game because of this pop-up, and it caused me to just play on my Xbox One instead. Now from what I've heard, this was fixed within the day, but the fact that that was the first thing that a lot of people saw of the game is not a great impression. But again, I keep saying it, you fix one bug, it introduces more bugs, let's get these bugs fixed before the full game comes out. Anyway, playing on the Xbox One was fine. For whatever reason, I felt like the graphics weren't as good on the Xbox One versus the PlayStation 4. I've always thought that the Xbox One was more powerful, and to be clear, I'm not playing on an Xbox One S, I'm playing on the base Xbox One versus the base PS4. But I just felt a noticeable dip in quality when it came to the character models. Specifically, Kamala's face would have weird malfunctions. There's significantly more like blur on people's faces occasionally. Overall, that was the biggest difference, was that the graphics were, in my opinion, noticeably different in a negative way. However, it is to be noted that while the PS4 has a very, very loud fan when playing this game, the Xbox One is pretty quiet. It stays pretty much the same as any other game, so there's something to be said about that. When the full version of the game comes out, I'll probably be playing the majority of my gameplay on the PS4. Another odd thing on Xbox that I would really like to see them fix is whenever an image is displayed, for whatever reason, it's shrunken and pushed into the far left corner of whatever box it's displaying in. What am I talking about? Well, for example, you get a custom nameplate for beating the beta after you beat all the harm room challenges. This nameplate carries over into the full game and is one of the rewards for playing. You can also use it during the beta, but while it looked fine on the PS4 version when I used it last week, on the Xbox One version, for whatever reason, this nameplate was shrunken to the point where I couldn't even see it and pushed into the far left corner. Both of the new nameplates were like this, and even the messages on the first screen of the game telling you about what the game is and explaining the Fortnite rewards have the same issue, where it pushes the image all the way to the top left. I have no idea what this is, but it's something that I feel like they really should have caught before it went out. Other than the graphics, there was one other thing I wanted to mention, which is that there were way more audio glitches and like stuttering problems on the Xbox One. For example, it would be a regular thing where a character would say an audio line and they would just start stuttering and everything would go silent for a while. Now, it's possible that this is on all versions, but I didn't encounter it at all in over 10 hours of gameplay on the PS4, but I did on the Xbox One several times. As for other bugs, we'll talk about this later, but it seemed like there were many bugs that were the same on both consoles that probably should have been fixed by now. So I decided to play the game on a harder difficulty. When I played on the PS4 for the first beta, I was playing on normal, and for the Xbox One, I decided to play on the hardest difficulty, which is brutal. Now, I'm no video game expert, especially with a game that I'm very new to, but I wanted to see what it was like so I could give my thoughts on it. Now, at first, I was having a lot of trouble with the difficulty. The first couple of story missions were really hard for me to do. If you watch my gameplay, I streamed on Twitch and I talked about my gameplay, and I just got killed so many times. And when I was playing it live, I genuinely considered stopping playing and going back at difficulty. I got actually pretty frustrated. And as I always say, I'm willing to accept that I'm just bad at video games, but I think that there's something else to take into account here. Now, after the harm room tutorial, once I was able to play the normal harm room missions and the other missions, suddenly the brutal difficulty wasn't as unforgiving. Yes, it was still hard, and yes, I still needed to be pretty precise with the way I was moving and dodging and attacking, but it didn't feel as unforgiving as it did earlier. And I started to think about why that was, and I realized some things. First of all, the first couple of missions in the game, you play alone in each combat scenario. Instead of being one in a group of 4, you're just one fighting many waves of enemies. I think that genuinely had something to do with the difficulty spike, because I feel like the game is designed to have 4 people fighting waves of enemies, and the AI feels unfair when it's focused on only one person. And the companion AI isn't like super powerful or anything. I just think that they divert the enemy AI way better. So I genuinely think that it's something to take into account, that potentially the brutal difficulty is considering you as a team instead of as an individual. And you'll probably be playing a lot as an individual versus with a team. The next thing was I had base level characters. I didn't have any gear really for these characters. I hadn't leveled them up very much. And so I feel like that also might have had something to do with how difficult the enemies were. And of course, the last thing is that I potentially just didn't understand the difficulty, and there's a possibility that it got easier for me as time went on because I was understanding how that difficulty worked. Now look, when it comes to difficulty, no Johns, 100%. I'm not trying to say that the game should be easier. I'm just raising concerns about potentially how the difficulty is designed. Again, I just felt like the enemies that were attacking me were doing so unfairly because I didn't really have the means to dodge or counter such a large amount of enemies coming at me. And to me, the reason for that is that normally I wouldn't be fighting by myself. Normally these enemies would be fighting 3 other players. So potentially just a tweak of the enemy AI or the amount of enemies, just so that way it feels like I can respond to their threat accordingly. Now, I want to be clear, I actually ended up really enjoying the brutal difficulty. Again, it's entirely possible that I just got used to the difficulty and that I wasn't familiar with it at the start, so it was much harder or it felt unfair. I just wanted to mention the possibility that it might be a programming issue. Technically, I never switched off of the brutal difficulty, and by the end of the beta, I felt a very healthy challenge and I had a lot of fun every time. Now, when I say technically, what I mean is when you join a group with other players, for some reason it automatically adjusts your difficulty level to normal. I understand all the players should be playing on the same difficulty. I'm just not sure if maybe normal is the best. Especially after my last review, I posed some questions about potentially the missions being too easy when you're with a group. So if anything, maybe the difficulty should be a little bit harder if you're with other people. Anyway, minor concerns aside, I actually really liked the brutal difficulty. I just thought it was worth mentioning because it was something that came to mind to me while I was playing. So, a lot of people in my Twitch chat asked me how I felt about the photo mode, and I was embarrassed to admit that I didn't touch it at all in the first beta. So, in the second beta, I made sure to give a lot of attention to the photo mode. And I have to say, it's one of the few parts of this game that I'm genuinely kind of disappointed in. Now, I took some really cool pictures, and I really liked the way they came out. There's definitely great potential here, but especially after playing games like Fallout 76, which has a better photo mode, and Ghost of Tsushima, which has just a godly photo mode, it's hard to look at this photo mode and really be impressed by it. It's really just missing too many features. You can play with the depth of field, you can add filters, and there are some other minor details that you can play with, but there's just not enough for you to do in photo mode. First of all, I would love to see borders like in the Insomniac Spider-Man photo mode. Many developers have shown that you can get really creative with the kinds of borders that you can have in your game. Then, I would like more options when it comes to your players. Expressions are huge. It would be really nice if we could control the kinds of expressions that our characters are making. clothing, or for characters who don't show their face, the ability to expose their face like Iron Man. It's just so crazy to me that whatever face your character is making is the one that's going to be in your photo. I feel like it would be really easy and super crucial to add facial expressions to photo mode. Then I would like to see poses added to photo mode. Even if you don't add poses, it would be nice to have the emote menu in the photo mode menu. Let's use those emotes that people are potentially paying for or earning in a place where it really makes sense. And then there's draw distance. I really feel like there's not enough room for you to take photos sometimes. I understand not allowing the player to go all around the map, but I just feel like we need a little bit more space when it comes to the camera's point of view and the character themselves. Most of the time I felt too cramped to take a really good picture, and it was really disappointing. Now let's move away from things that I would like to see added to photo mode and focus on things that I straight up just didn't like about the photo mode. First of all, if you take visual damage, like damage that is visible on your screen, for example like frost damage, that will show up in your photo mode, and there's no way to turn it off. That's a huge oversight in my opinion. If you're being attacked by a frost enemy, the border of your screen will look all frosty. That'd be great for a border in photo mode, but you should be able to turn that kind of stuff off. What if my character is in a really cool pose and I really wanted to take a picture? I definitely don't want a picture that's forcing me to use the border that's around the screen. And then in the same vein as that, other environmental effects like gamma radiation or flames or heat or impact waves, all of those would be really nice to toggle on and off. Again, because I didn't have poses, I was trying to create my own while in combat. And while I was playing as the Hulk, I would be surrounded by too much green energy to really see my character. I wanted to take a picture of him in a unique position, and it would be really nice to be able to turn off stuff like the gamma effect so that way I can actually see the character. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's pretty cool to have these things in your photo, but I would like the option to turn them off. Then there are just some weird limitations to the photo mode. For example, if you're downed, you can't take a picture at all. Again, if you don't have any poses, you're always looking for unique ways to take pictures of your character, and your character being downed is a unique pose, so you want to take a picture. But you can't enter photo mode at all when your character is downed. But whatever, let's give that the benefit of the doubt. I guess I understand why that might be the case. However, one of the more egregious examples of where you can't take a photo is when Tony Stark is flying. Flying is a main part of Iron Man's gameplay, and it's a main part of the character. Not to mention, again, he looks very unique when he's flying. There are so many pictures that you could take of him in that pose that I would imagine people would want to take, and you just can't do it. This is such a weird oversight to me, especially because of how popular Iron Man is and how many people play the character in the game so far. Adding more freedom to the photo mode and adding more options in the photo mode menus are the biggest pieces of advice that I would give to make photo mode better. I had fun using it and I took some great photos, but I would really like to see it improve moving forward. Lastly, let's just talk about some general issues with the game and potentially some bugs. I had a lot of issues with AI companions and mission objectives while playing this weekend. For example, on the New York mission, I couldn't complete it because an enemy got stuck behind a wall. I was actually playing online while this was happening, and everyone in my group went looking around the entire map trying to find a way to get to this enemy, and we just couldn't do it. So one of the people in our group decided to restart from the previous checkpoint. And when we did that, we had even less luck than we did before. So ultimately I had to quit the mission and start from the beginning. Again, I'm not sure if this is just the current build or if it's the Xbox version, but I saw a ton of enemies just acting very strangely. For example, I saw what I assume is a T-pose out of a lot of enemies. It's not as exaggerated as the normal T-pose, but it's kind of like arms separated and standing completely still. This would happen a lot in the harm room where I would just see enemies just standing, and I would have to hit them to actually cause them to wake up. Then when it comes to parts of the game not working properly, I can safely say that environmental puzzles just don't work sometimes. I was kind of under the impression that it was my fault that certain environmental puzzles weren't working the first beta. Environmental puzzles with switches or terminals just can't be engaged with at times. When I first encountered this in the original beta, I thought I was the problem, or I thought maybe sometimes they just can't be interacted with, but that can't be the case, because if they can't be interacted with, they just won't appear. What I'm talking about is switches and buttons refusing to work, even if there's a mission objective telling you to go where the switches would let you go. This was super frustrating because it felt like there was nothing I could do about this. And this is something that's happened pretty consistently since the first beta. Even more odd is if an environmental puzzle doesn't work 1 second and I die and restart the mission, sometimes the environmental puzzle would start to work when I go play it again, proving to me that it wasn't intended for the puzzle not to work the first time. Look, at the end of the day, if this isn't a bug, please don't put objective markers on things that I can't access. Then there are other bugs that are just consistent between the Xbox One version and the PS4 version. For example, there's an invisible ledge in the New York level that I got stuck on and couldn't hop off of in the PS4 version that I also found in the exact same place in the Xbox version. I actually ended up dying because I got stuck on this ledge in the Xbox version. I was shocked to find that they're in the same place. Another consistent bug is, while I was playing in the PS4 version, there's a specific turret that rises from the ground. Because I know where it is from playing this mission so many times, I often will shoot at it as it rises. However, this is one of the few crashes I've encountered with the game. On the PS4 version when this happened, I thought it was just a random crash, but then I had a crash in the exact same spot for the exact same reason on the Xbox One. I don't know if it's all turrets rising from the ground that you shouldn't shoot at or else your game will crash, or if it's just this specific mission, but either way, it's something that really should be fixed if it's in many versions of the game. Moving on, in the world, you'll often find boxes that have resources in them. You need to collect these resources to use them for gear. However, there's this really weird thing about resources where if you destroy something containing them, you need to wait. You need to wait for them to fall on the ground and then be collected by your character. They do not automatically collect, so a lot of the time when I was first playing the game, I would just destroy these boxes and run away thinking that I had gotten whatever resources came from them. And then when I noticed that I didn't get any resources from them, I assumed that they didn't actually have a purpose. But no, they do. You're supposed to collect resources from them. You just need to wait to collect them. This is a really weird, antiquated way of doing this, and it's something that I'd like to see fixed in the future. The last thing on this list of random critiques is the camera. The camera is abysmal. I don't know what to suggest to fix it, but all I can say is that it does negatively affect my gameplay. I've heard a lot of people suggest that pulling the camera back might help, and I've heard a lot of people complain about the camera shaking. I don't really have issues with that, and I don't really know if pulling the camera back will help any. My issue is more with walls getting in the way or just losing visibility on my character. There have been multiple times where I've died because the camera just isn't helping me. It feels like the camera is working against me a lot of the times. The camera is one of the biggest things that I would like to see changed about the game. And that's about it for my criticisms and suggestions. Before I go, I'd like to mention some things that I still like about the game. Opinions that I have that are still consistent from my last review. First of all, I really still like the gear system. I still get excited when I get gear, and it really just seems that the more I play the game, the more my opinion improves on the gear. I do think that the opinions and criticisms that other people have about the gear system should be listened to by developers, because I think there are some legitimate criticisms. However, my opinion is pretty unchanged about the gear. I really enjoy the system. I also still really like the combat. During the first weekend of the beta, I mostly played as Black Widow and Hulk, but during the second week, I played as Iron Man and Kamala, and I gotta say, I still really enjoy finding the differences between all of these characters. Leveling up and earning skill points to slowly find out who these characters are and to continue to add depth to their gameplay was something that was really cool about the second beta. But yeah, I really like the gameplay. The combat is a lot of fun to me, and I can definitely still see myself playing this a lot in the future. And I guess the final thing is that I kind of tried to pay more attention to the story this time around. And while my opinions are basically the same as my first review, which is that the story is not bad, but it definitely isn't the reason why I'm coming to the game at the moment, I did hear several details that either made me more curious about the game's full story or piqued my interest in terms of deep cuts and references to the comics. They were just little things, it wasn't anything huge, but I thought it was worth mentioning. And that's my review for the second beta of the Marvel Avengers video game. So the next and final beta is going to be dropping tomorrow, and I'm really excited to get to play in this sandbox for one last time before what's essentially 2 weeks of waiting before the full game comes out, excluding the extra 3 days that certain people get to play the game. Well, like myself. This weekend is going to be the open beta for all players on all platforms. That's PC, Xbox One, and PS4. So if you're curious at all about the game, or even if you're skeptical of the game, now is definitely the time to check it out. And I'm especially excited for those who haven't had the chance to play the beta yet, but are super eager to play this weekend. Chances are I'm going to have a third beta review, but that's only if I have new things to say. If all of my opinions stay exactly the same, I probably won't upload a third review. But if I have anything that I think is important to illustrate to people who will potentially buy the game, I'll definitely be doing a third review. And as for the full game review, that's probably going to come way down the line, so don't expect that anytime soon. But anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. I want to thank you so much for watching. If for whatever reason you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you're excited or interested in more Avengers content, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I'm working on all sorts of Avengers videos, such as news and analysis videos that I'm going to be uploading in the future. So if you're interested in the game at all, make sure to stick around. I also streamed every day this week talking about my beta footage, and I'll be doing the same thing Monday to Thursday next week. So if you want to watch me play video games live, or if you want to see more of my Marvel Avengers footage, check me out on Twitch at carrotscraps. All of my other social media like TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter are also at carrotscraps. And that's going to do it for this video. Thanks again so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Hello and welcome to another carrotscraps video, and by another I mean the 25th. The 25th. So I'm on the 26th.